أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. My dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace and blessings of Allah Almighty be upon you all. Welcome once again to another episode of Why Religion. We've been bringing you various topics under this series, and today we're here to discuss another very important topic, a topic that affects all of us, and that's the main aim of this program, to reach out to you and educate one another about things that affect us in our society. And today under Why Religion, we'll be discussing the care for orphans. In every society, Allah Almighty has told us in the Holy Quran that He has created for us life and death so He may test us. In some instances, we leave young and elderly ones behind as our ayahs, as our offspring. And it becomes the responsibility of individuals, it becomes the responsibility of society and community to take care of those people behind us. But Islam has given us very clear instructions as to how to deal with these people in our society and to take care of them. And in this program today, I'm with two of our very close friends at the MTA Gambia Studios here in Tallinn to discuss this topic into detail. And as we do it usually, we also went out to ask people in the community, in the society, to give us their opinion, their thoughts, their questions as to the topic of care for orphans. On my immediate right here in the studio, I have Alhaj Ibrahim Mbo, who is the National Vice President, that is Naib Amir III of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, the Gambia. And he also serves as the External Affairs Secretary nationally for the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, the Gambia. And on my far right is Mr. Musa Kijera. He is into finance by profession, and he's also serving in the same capacity in the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat nationally as the National Internal Auditor. Mr. Kijera, welcome to the show, and indeed Mr. Nawamir, welcome to the show as well. So the topic of orphans, as we know, it's in every society. But before we go into the details of how to take care of them, what's their responsibility, what's our responsibility, how would you define an orphan? Who is an orphan?
Simply put, simply put, an orphan is somebody, a child who has lost both parents at childhood.
Right. So yeah. That's a very clear-cut, simple, straightforward definition of who an orphan is. Mr. Kijera, we also do know that, for example, in the animal kingdom, when an animal loses the mother, that's when the animal is regarded as an orphan, because the father doesn't play much of a role. But as human beings, both parents are so important that when one dies, the other one automatically takes responsibility, full responsibility. But as defined here, an orphan is somebody who loses both parents. What do you have to say about that in our society?
Yes, I totally agree with Mr. Mo. An orphan is somebody who lost both parents, the mother and the father. And we have them in the society because, I mean, death is a natural thing. It awaits no one. So orphans do exist in the society, and there are those people who eventually lost their mothers, fathers, and they would be in the society for no one to take care of them, as probably their fathers and mothers may do. Yes, yes.
So looking at that, I'm coming back to you. In the Gambia, for example, we are very fortunate that our family bonds are very strong. In every society you go into, when the mother and the father, even when both of them pass away, the family, the external family tends to kind of, take care of that child automatically. They don't immediately lose anyone to take care of them. You've traveled around the world seeing that in a society. How great is that as the Gambian society is compared to other places that you've probably visited?
Yes, in fact, our interrelation system in the Gambia, family system in the Gambia is so unique and it's so good that it's hardly found in any other parts of the world. Even some so-called 100% Muslim countries, the system in the Gambia is so peculiar that it's very difficult to find somewhere. Let's say, for instance, our family relationship is such that, we are so bonded together that to a point whereby the impact of being an orphan, the negative impact of being an orphan is reduced drastically thanks to our, family, system, family interrelation system. And I think that's a very, very, very commendable thing, indeed, in the Gambia, yes, yes.
And also, just to add on to that, sometimes you would see, Mr. Mbo, that you being an elderly in our society, somebody who's blessed with a lot of children, and they see that either their cousin or their sister or their brother doesn't have kids, immediately they have their child, they pass that child on. And it takes the child a long time, sometimes up to adulthood, before they even realize that this person is not my biological mother. But coming to the world at large, and also the Gambia, where we know that these orphans do have challenges, let's highlight some of the problems that they may face in the society that they find themselves in.
Well, in the Gambia, one of the blessings turned problems is that orphans are normally pampered by people that take care of them. They look at them with sympathy, over sympathize to a point where they don't even want to quote unquote train the child. Alabula, Fengolem, leave him apart, he's an orphan. Right. Don't trouble him. It's like the orphan should not be touched, and so on. So, and that's, to me, is a blessing turned disadvantage because of the fact that the orphan needs to be trained, they need to be shown the right and wrong, and so on and so forth. But people, it's like just what Brother Musa is saying, people are so caring, especially when it comes to people they feel are disadvantaged at that young age, that they want to just bring them towards them close and not, let nobody touch them.
Yeah, that's a very, I never thought of that. That's a very, we become too sensitive towards them. And in some stages, we sympathize with them. This one has lost the mother and the father. Don't treat them this way, as if that's a very. But coming to also looking at the world at large, going beyond the borders of the Gambia, where sometimes one could say unnatural causes of orphanage, where we know here that when somebody is sick, their parents are sick, they die naturally. But sometimes other reasons also lead to orphanage, other very unfortunate reasons, migration, war. Looking at the world at large where we find ourselves in today, how would you highlight that and the things that such kids go through?
Yeah, actually I want to add on to what Mr. Mbow said with regards to the taking care of, orphans, to a point whereby people will over-sympathize them, that they would not like to correct them or straighten them when they want to go astray. I think that's a very unfortunate part of the whole thing. If you like, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam once said, a child's paradise lies under the feet of their mothers. And mother here, I will not limit it to mother as in the woman in the family, but I will extend it to anybody who's looking after the child. So if you want to train the child properly, whether an orphan, especially orphans, you must do what is right for them. When they're going astray, stop them. When they're doing the wrong thing, stop them. Be hard on them in a nice way in order to correct them. So the society should just move away from over-sympathizing them to a point whereby they will not be trained properly to become responsible adults in the family. Yes, coming back to your point, yes, you have many instances where orphanage is created. Some, like we say, people will lose their parents naturally. Some would migrate and then go to look for, greener pastures. Some would be perish in wars and conflict. In all of these incidences, I think the society in which these children are left behind should play their responsibility. And the society starts with the immediate family. Because yes, it is a commandment of God to travel, That's a commandment of Allah. So, you can travel to go and look for, greener pastures or to go and seek further education. So if you do that and left your family behind or your young ones, the immediate family, the society, the community, and the state at large should take personal responsibility, should take responsibility of these kids.
Something that, I mean, in the other segments when we discuss in this program, we'll look at how Islam puts responsibility on individuals, on families, and in the society at large. But like I said before, we also went out to the public. We asked people these same questions about the care for orphans, what their thoughts are, what they feel about it, how much they feel that the Gambia as a society is doing in taking care of orphans. And please enjoy that segment and join us back here in the studios as we discuss other aspects as far as this topic is concerned.
I believe some of their problems they are facing can be discrimination and like unequal and unfair treatment, because you know they treat them as if they're inferior, and they have been discriminated. Their rights are not being given to them fairly just because they don't have someone to stand for them, because they lack that parent to stand for them and to be there for them, while other kids are like have all that with them. So I think discrimination and violation of their rights are some of the very key things that orphans are really facing in our society today.
You know, most people disregard these orphans, you know, and secondly, when maybe someone is opportuned to train one of the orphans, you know, they maltreat them so badly that it will be very hard for them to cope.
One problem of being an orphan is stress. Having lost parents, you are stressed because you know what it was like when both your parents were living on, even if one of your parents is late. The pressure in that issue even is causing people to even be suicidal in other areas of the world.
We find out that since there are no parents or relatives to care for them, they are being marginalized. Their rights are being denied. They deny them education, they deny them health-wise, and so many other things.
I could say they don't have a good place to sleep in. You could see a lot of orphans on the street or among their own family members where they cannot even have somewhere to sleep or good clothes to wear or even to have food to eat. So I could say shelter, food, and clothing is one of the biggest problems facing orphans.
Thank you very much, our dear viewers. Welcome back here as we continue to discuss about the care for orphans. If you're just joining us, this is Why Religion, a series coming to you from MTA Gambia Studios. And today we are talking about orphans, as you just heard from the members of the public. Mr. Kizaru, you touched on a very important subject, and you said that, you hinted on it when you said even 100% Islamic societies, sometimes even in the Gambia, we tend to, be more kind towards orphans than those. And Mr. Mbo, I'll touch on that. Looking at that, we have warfare in a lot of so-called Islamic countries, and these are leaving tremendous amount of kids without parents. Sometimes they migrate to a country like the United States, and what's happening right now is parents are becoming split from their kids right at the airport, and this is going on. So we'll go into the details of what Islam has taught us. But if you look at a country like Syria and Tunisia and all these countries that are going through trauma and how they're creating orphans and not taking care of them, how do we create that contrast between the teachings of Islam and how it's being practiced?
That's a very interesting question. Generally, people talk Islam these days, but they hardly practice Islam. And that is the core of the problem, not only on orphanage, but in general. So if people come back to their senses, people come back to their relationship that they should have between man and man, they should take care of those little kids, those who really at that point in time are in their need of supervision, in their need of medical care, in their need of education, and all of these things. So to even start a class by an elder who could even bring the children together and just teach them something, it could help. and it will help, because children are very easy to adapt in any circumstance you give. Watching some of these atrocities, it will be amazing to see that a child with a football is already playing football. So it's just like, I'm forgetting all the atrocities that are there. So if that child or those children are put together and just given some guidance, it will help.
And Islam has left no stone unturned. It has told us, as an individual, as a person, we see, for example, the al-mudo. We use that term a lot, al-mudo. Kids who are sometimes, their own parents are alive, but their condition is even worse than some orphans. We also have those in our society where they're put in environments, and we're not sitting here saying that it's bad to send your kid to a burden school, whether it's a boarding school, whether it's secular education or religious education. That's not the case. The case being that some kids are abandoned. And if you go to the provinces sometimes, we see kids that are chained together. These things are happening between the borders of Senegal and the Gambia. Those of us who travel to the villages, we see that. Individually, how can we bring about some sort of hope for change as far as taking care of orphans are concerned?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Diba, for the question. The case of these almudos in our societies, we can find them in Gambia and Senegal. It is very much common within this, this sub-region. It is very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate because these kids are our future leaders. And the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, the upper hand is better than the lower hand. That means begging is something that a Muslim should avoid. So if you train your children to be out there begging for what they eat in the name of, because you send them away to go and study Islam, to go and study the Holy Quran, the purpose is completely defeated. I think the step we need to take as individuals is at home, at family level. We should be taught that begging in this fashion is completely not nice in Islam as far as we are concerned as Muslims. It's not nice, it's unacceptable. When we understand that at family level, we would not be sending our children out there to be, in a fashion that we are seeing today. They will, virtually turn into beggars, street beggars. That's individual level, family level, and society can also step in to ensure that these things are stopped and they don't, go further.
And if we all stood up together,
yeah.
That's what would make us.
Yes.
One point I want to bring here is that at individual level at the home, sometimes the parents who've passed away might have left some money. It's not necessarily that the orphan then is poor. So it behoves then the people who are going to take care of them to actually take care of them in terms of their needs and in terms of whatever should make them better people when they grow up. So if people at home, people in the compounds have the same thought of bringing up these orphans in the right manner, it would really help a whole lot.
So you talked about inheritance. Is it the right of an orphan after their parents have died, they are young? Is it their right to inheritance? Do they have specific
rights? Oh yes. It's their right that Islam has given them. It has even talked about the person who is taking care of him. I don't know exactly what percentage of the inheritance that they should consume, but they should make sure that they keep some of it for the orphans until they grow old, when they can pass on the wealth to the orphans. Actually, it's even that part of it that Islam has gone to the point of saying that even one can marry an orphan.
Yeah, absolutely. And the verse that you're alluding to is in chapter 4 of the Holy Quran, verse 7, when Allah Almighty says, and test the understanding of the orphans until they attain the age of marriage. Then if you find in them sound judgment, deliver to them their property. This is a complete direct directive from Allah Almighty Himself, and devour it not in extravagance and haste against their growing up. And whoso is rich, let him abstain, and whoso is poor, let him eat thereof with equity. So Islam has given, this is so beautiful that even with orphans, it doesn't just say make sure they have their wealth. It makes it very clear how to do it, and this is theirs, and it must be given to them as a clear instruction. I think it's great that you touched on that. Sometimes, you know, they are, because no one is there to stand for them, no immediate person, or if they're given in the care of somebody and they know that this person has to inherit this, they make it their property instead of making it the property of the orphan. I think society needs to be taught that. And also, Mr. Kijari, you touched on education. If these children have to be educated in the society, instead of, you know, leaving them to go out and sometimes even beg and become a burden on the society, as an organization, now you touched on society a little bit, individuals can do what they can. What can society do to make sure that we eradicate, you know, some of this, you know, homelessness that is found in orphans, and bring them together? And as in the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, I'm sure we have something like that. If you can touch a little bit on that as a society and as a religious group.
Yeah, like we say, if the society can come together to ensure that proper education and understanding is taught to people, so that they can understand the importance of, you know, taking care of orphans. There can be some kind of civil pressure groups also, whereby their aims and objectives would be to promote the welfare of orphans, and then from societal level to, you know, government level, so that it will become a law at some point that the government will completely, prohibit this type of activities we found today, sending, you know, minors as young as 7, 8 to go out in the street to beg. You know, they can come up with laws to say, going forward, or henceforth, this kind of activity, as far as children are concerned, children in general, it should not be those who are orphans, because some of these kids you see out in the street begging, some of them have their parents alive, you know. So it's like there should be a law that would look into this matter, like we have in our Jamaat system, is such that the Jamaat takes special interest to look after the welfare of the orphans, and not necessarily Ahmadiyya members alone, but, you know, whoever the Jamaat can help. It doesn't matter whether you're an Ahmadi or not. You know, these programs are well established within the Jamaat to look after welfare.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, actually, this problem is addressed by the Jamaat with Wafi now. It's a scheme that takes care of children in terms of everything from birth to whenever they are able to decide for themselves what they want to do.
Right.
In terms of education, feeding, if possible, you know, giving them the right religious education they should, coming together and so on. So if other religious groups could do the same thing with their young people, including orphans, you know, then we have somewhere to start. I think Ahmadiyat is in isolation here in doing this. Right. And it's a very, very important institution, right, because it develops the child holistically.
Right. And Mr. Kijera, coming back to you, sometimes, you know, we do say that when a child loses both of their parents, somebody adopts them and with a good intention. But of course, we do know that even amongst your own children, you may be tender towards some compared to others. As far as the teachings of Islam is concerned, or even not even specifically Islam, humanly, it's impossible to love 1, 2, 3, 4 people the same exact way. How can one balance between the way they love their own children and somebody they adopt? Because it does come with some degree of responsibility. You don't just scoop a child because they lost their parents. You say, well, I'll just take them in. And you don't give them that level of care and equality. Like you said, kids do adopt. Kids can read, what's going on if you're treating your own child one way and the orphan in another way. So how should we do that as a society, as individuals?
Yes, well, actually, in our society in the Gambia, there is already a culture that's in place, and I think we need to look into that culture seriously and then improve on it. This culture is, for instance, if you have a brother who passed away, left a family, it's like we say keta, right? Say, and the purpose of doing that, the rationale behind this is so beautiful if you know. It's like they don't want the family to scatter. In a sense, they want to bring the family together so that they can enjoy more or less the same protection and love in the absence of, the elder brothers or the uncles or the whatever's absence. So now I think with that in place, that's a very good start, right? Although it should not be, compulsory to inherit somebody's wife, Keta Muso. It should be on free will. But the idea that to bring them so they can stay within the same family is good. And I think treating your children and that of your brothers or other person's children fairly is impossible, But the basic needs, right? The basic necessities, you should try as much as you can to provide that to all of them. The other thing that may have to do with love or affection, sometimes that is uncontrollable. But what is so apparent, what is in the open, for instance, taking them all to the same school, providing, the same kind of clothing for them, or similar, the same type of bedding, housing, and all of these things, you should try as much as you can to do that. So I think, but this cannot be without inculcating some fear of Allah in you. That's the most important thing, yes.
Key, yes. And also looking at, like you mentioned before, this issue of inheriting a brother who's passed away, their wife. Islam, and beautifully, when Islam discusses in Surah An-Nisa the topic of orphans, immediately after that, as it's discussing it, it brings in polygamy. Yes. And in this society, taking it from Islam, it also, and Mr. Mo, you can shed some light. He's the only experienced one here as far as polygamy is concerned. You can tell us, yes. Exactly, you can tell us a little bit about that. How does polygamy address taking care of orphans, as the Holy Quran has put it?
Actually, polygamy takes care of the family itself before orphanage comes. Right. Your family, as you mentioned earlier on, it's impossible to love even your children equally, right. Okay? But Islam has given you the responsibility to provide for all of them, to even provide that love for all of them. You cannot do it equally, but even hide, because for every child that you have, the love for every child is based on a certain thing and a certain quality that the child has, as far as you are concerned. That's my experience. I have 12 kids, and for each of them, if you see me with them, it's joy, and I love each one because of a certain thing that individual is to me, right. Okay? But in totality, I have love for the whole family, and they all cherish it. Okay, so that's the number one thing before you start taking somebody else on board, either somebody that you inherit or somebody that you adopt. They should be treated the same way. Provide for everybody. For me, if I cannot provide for the 5 children who are right there, I will not provide for any. So that's the culture that I have that I have built, and it works. So that as soon as I do it, I've done it for all, So this is the situation. Prepare that for yourself. Make sure that you treat all of your children alike, and then whoever comes, you'll be able to go through the same pattern.
And not feeling that, because this one is an orphan, I'm doing them a favor. They're not my full responsibility. No, if you take that on, it becomes your full responsibility. But we've also asked you, the members of the public, as far as how should society deal with orphans. Let's see what the people in the streets had to say about this question. And we'll come back to discuss another segment of this program.
So society should look beyond what we are now seeing, because there is an extra hand that we can send to people, especially orphans and those that are vulnerable in our society. And so for me, society should rethink, and we should come back to our roots again. Let us not leave everything to so-called government, because the government alone cannot do it. And then we find maybe in a family there will be somebody that is well off who can even take one or two and really take care of them, and then we'll have the peace that we need.
Let the treatment be equal. Treat them the way you treated your children. I think that is what we make everything to be okay and normal.
We need to adopt them in the system, provide for them. The government at large should make a column for them, adopt them into the system, possibly give scholarships. If you see orphans, they cannot, give them scholarship. The government can do that. NGOs can do that. So you give them scholarship, bring them into the society so that they have sense of belonging. When you don't do these things, you find out you're pushing them away into the wide world to do, things that are not proper.
So we should just treat them equally among other children.
Welcome back into the studios, our dear viewers. I hope you enjoyed that little piece that we put together for you, so you can also get perspective of the members of the society who have shared their thoughts, and we're very grateful to those people who took their time to share what they think should be adopted as far as taking care of orphans is concerned. Coming back here, now we'll be discussing as to who has the primary responsibility when orphanage takes place. Who becomes the primary responsible individual or individuals? And then I'll take that to Mr. Mbo to shed some light on that. Does anyone just jump on them and adopt them, or how does it happen?
Well, the primary responsibility actually is with the home that is taking care of the orphans. They have the primary responsibility of making sure that the orphan is comfortable in the compound and be provided for. And when the home finds it difficult to do so, maybe they can seek help from friends and relatives. But also there are orphanages now that are owned by civil society, some organizations, and so on. So when the orphans go there, they take full responsibility of the orphans. I know Islam has taught us a lot about taking care of orphans, and that will come later on. But an organization like the SOS Children's Village has been doing a very wonderful job for the past, 40 years in taking care of orphans. And so those people have a responsibility to the orphans. There are some other petty, groups that are also, claiming to take care of orphans. They have a responsibility to the children that they are taking care of. They should not exploit them. Actually, they should have responsibility. Nowadays, when people look for where the money is that they can get from donor agencies, and they can create all sorts of things and call it anything that will cost the donors to give them money, right, including taking care of orphans. Right. And then when the proceed comes, they don't take care of them. And it is their primary responsibility. If they ask on behalf of the orphans, they should give to the orphans.
Yeah, and I think it's good that you've highlighted it, because it comes as a whole package. Now, this is a life of an entire individual. If the parents were alive, what they would do for them, whoever takes responsibility should try. Maybe the love that the parents may have for them naturally, you may not be able to provide for that. But basic things like a home is very important to every child. Food, shelter, and education. I mean, without education, without establishment, you don't just feed the child and say, be grateful that I give you a shelter, and expect them to just, transition into this real world. It's really difficult. And in as much as NGOs and may try to do their best, they can only do what they can. they can't go beyond that. But Islam has given us clear instructions. And sometimes we discuss in one of the programs that we tend to have a separation between this is Islam and this is our lives. No, it's one, it's a whole code. And within the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, by the grace of God, we see that when kids who, unfortunately, I mean, I've traveled to Rabwa, to Pakistan, where the headquarters of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat is. We have Buyutul Hamd. It is an entire neighborhood, of where, either they're divorcees or widows or orphans, where they're given homes, they have education, they have food, they have shelter. Everything that the Jamaat can provide is practically being done as an organization, and donations are given throughout the world as far as that is concerned. So people who do not have that, you being an Ahmadi Muslim and seeing this firsthand, what the Jamaat is doing, sometimes we don't attach religion to some of these things, because in a Gambian society, they don't tend to see these things. Religion is like when you go to the mosque or in Ramadan, you see the Imam stand up and give a speech. But in things like this, so what are Gambians missing as far as an organization like Khilafat is concerned in taking care of the instructions of the Holy Quran being implemented and in terms of, and orphans?
Before Musa comes in, before I forget, normally I tell people in all religious organizations or dealings, especially pertaining to marriage, people take Allah out of the equation and try to bring some other solutions to problems, and those solutions are the causes of the problems. Right. So and that's it. It happens everywhere, even with orphanage. That is what happens. If you take Allah out of this equation, you get nothing, and you start, yeah.
And in most of the verses of the Holy Quran, in fact, where Allah deals with taking care of orphans, He ends up calling Himself Al-Aziz, that He is the mighty. So if you are responsible over the orphans, you have power over them, but remember that Allah is ultimately the one that has power over you. So He is the ultimate carer. He's just giving you a responsibility. So yes, Musa, I'm coming to that.
Yes, if we reflect on the teachings of the first prophet of Allah, the Prophet Adam, the instruction given to him, the Sharia, if you like, is like he was commanded to ensure the society where he lives in, people don't go hungry, they should be clothed, they should be fed, and they should be provided with shelter. These are basic things. And with the coming of Islam, this was developed further to a point whereby when the Holy Prophet, his last address, speech at Arafat, right? He was reported to have said, today Allah has completed His favor upon all Muslims and chosen Islam as a way of life, as a religion. Islam is a way of life for people. That's why the Holy Prophet said, my drinking, my sitting, my sleeping, my walking, my everything is for the sake of Allah. So if you look at that closely, it is telling you that whatever we do as Muslims should be based on Islam. Our life itself should be embedded in the teachings of Islam to a point whereby we should not, as Muslims, we should not sit and see anybody go hungry. Yeah? So when we have that concept, that mindset, taking care of orphans would be a lot more easier. If you look at the ratio or the population of orphans in the country today, if you want to put that in a ratio, my brother, is like, it's just nothing. So if each and every family member of those people, let's say, who are living at the social, we hit this place, how to call it, at Bakote, SOS Bakote, probably the number of orphans sitting there would not be more than 1,000. And how many families do we have in this country? How many? If each family said, look, yes, he's my family member, I will not let him go anywhere. I'll treat him like my family members. You will not even have these types of centers. My advice is people should look at themselves closely, properly. If you are a Muslim, you profess to belong to Islam, following the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we should look at ourselves closely and make sure that we fulfill the description that Allah says, the best amongst you is he who is, the most righteous. And righteous encompass all of these things, to look after your neighbors, other people, passers-by, orphans, and all of these things. Otherwise, to curb this kind of unfortunate thing where orphans are left idle in the street would be very, very, very difficult. So the responsibility, the proud responsibility lies on family first. Whether you are Muslim or not, I think we need to.
Well,
yes.
when we look at culture in general, for example, the Arab culture, even before Islam, when the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was an orphan, and society embraced him. His immediate family, we all know how he moved from one family member, grandfather, uncle. No one just abandons you like that, and it becomes extremely difficult. Their family, even if a family doesn't have much, that's the whole life. You do not know what the child, will become in the future. And now, Mitzab, coming to you, the experience that you've had, the exposure, not only in serving the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, but as a teacher, and you've worked with kids throughout in your career, seeing that, the essence of having education in the life of a child, especially in the Gambia here, if you can throw some light on that within a minute, and we'll close the program with that.
Well, actually, it's good that you've mentioned that, because I have all through my teaching life taken care of those special kids, be they orphans or people with special disadvantages. To the last school that I was principal at, that was Tahir, I had a breakfast basket that I prepared for people, for children who are traveling 7-8 kilometers to school and going back 7-8 kilometers after school. I prepare breakfast for them. As soon as they come, before they go to class, they eat, because they needed that.
They say an empty sack cannot stand.
Exactly.
Dear viewers, that's all we have time for. This is a great time to end the program, but you haven't fed us yet, so hopefully we'll eat before we leave. Thank you so much for having us. We hope you've enjoyed this program. This is Why Religion, and today we are talking about care for orphans. We'll bring more programs for you in the future. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.